Good afternoon. How's everybody doing today? Good. Hope you're having a good day. So hopefully you're in the right place if you're looking to learn a lot more about WorkSpaces and AppStream 2.0. So the agenda for the session today is really to focus kind of a brief overview, just by a show of hands, if you don't mind. How many of you are brand new to WorkSpaces, haven't used it before, and looking to kind of get a lot of information today? Great. And then show of hands for folks that at least tried it, looked at it, or are using it in some form or fashion. Good, kind of a mixture. That's great. So we'll take the time to kind of give you a brief overview of WorkSpaces, but today really is about kind of getting into some in-depth concepts around WorkSpaces, especially around automation and provisioning around the end user and the life cycle. So good afternoon. My name is Andrew Defoe. I'm a Senior Solutions Architect with AWS and State and Local Government. Very grateful today to be joined by Alex Paraluca with the Arizona Department of Transportation. So Alex is going to take us through his success story and lend a little bit of his insight and expertise into his experience with WorkSpaces and what he has achieved, and hopefully you'll get a lot out of this session. And with that, let's get started. So, customers, I think, of all shapes and sizes, especially in public sector, whether they are using physical desktop infrastructure or using virtual desktop infrastructure, are telling us, a lot of key things about where, some of the pain points are and where we can potentially help solve some problems. The first, concept, and I think the first key point, is around service levels. We hear customers wanting to be able to improve, service requests for provisioning, for help desk, cut those times down from days or hours down to minutes. And be able to do that at scale, and be able to do that regardless of the number of administrators they have. Try to minimize the overhead. And we think about concepts like continuity of operations, the ability with WorkSpaces, and the ability in general to as more and more workloads move to AWS and move to the cloud, you want to be able to provide a solution for your end users to get to those applications, especially in the event of an emergency. And so the concept of being able to support service levels in terms of help desk provisioning, but also continuity, is extremely important. Customers want to be able to support a number of different types of users. That could be full-time employees, where you're thinking about more of a full desktop replacement. It could be temporary workers, contracted or federated workers. It could be mobile workers, mobile workforce. They're users on the go. They're just looking for a secondary desktop to access from a mobile device. It could be, if you're in the ed space, it could be students. It could even be public access if you think about public libraries, kiosk types of approaches. But you need a solution to kind of cover all those different use cases and handle provisioning for all those different opportunities. With that also requires flexibility of devices and client types. So for a full desktop replacement, you're usually thinking about a thin client type of device. Obviously, for users on the go, you're thinking about tablet, mobile devices. But you may have situations where you need to have a client or a user access their desktop without installing anything. And so web access over an HTML5 browser becomes very important. And also, security, of course, is job zero for AWS. It's the same for our customers. Customers want to be able to securely authenticate, access the desktop, be able to support encryption at rest and in transit, and be able to support that in a private network, and really control the routing and the ingress and egress to those desktops. And then lastly, customers want to be able to do that without changing their underlying applications. They want to be able to provide the right level of performance to the user to support those business applications without a lot of rework. So with that, without any further delay, let me introduce Alex, and he's going to talk about his success story, and then we'll kind of get into some depth on WorkSpaces and some of the key concepts around provisioning.
Good afternoon. My name is Alex. I work for Department of Transportation, State of Arizona, and I believe everybody is familiar with is State Department of Transportation. It includes issuing driver licenses, vehicle titles, highway operations, traffic lights, signs, etc., and so on. So typically, such type of agency, it includes tons and tons and different non-IT people. Those people are serving customers at the front desk. They issue driver license, and they care about IT only as a tool to doing their main jobs. And for those people, what's the most important about IT? It's agility. It's easiness to use it, running smoothly, without any interruptions, to be stable, and very easy to use. And considering comparing two technologies, PC as a service or remote desktop as a service, or DES, like it's known. Definitely, we're considering something like remote computing. It would be much better in this situation. And we tried different approaches. Currently, we are using some PC solutions, some VDI solutions from previous deployments. You know those. There are not so many competitive technologies in the world. You can count them with one palms. And based on that, now the current decision is to move into WorkSpaces. To say briefly, what is WorkSpace? WorkSpace is remote PC in the cloud. Basically, users can reach it with some kind of interface and then work remotely on that PC. And what benefits are given to us? So first is eliminates on-premises server and storage infrastructure, reduces operating costs. So we are working towards removing local data center at all, moving completely 100% to the cloud. Then we can use variety of client devices. In the beginning of 21st century, you heard such term like internet-based, internet-ready computer. What did it mean? It meant that it can launch a browser, connect to web services, and serve the internet. Now we can tell about client device as a cloud-ready computer. So you can turn it on, connect to the cloud, log into your remote environment, and using this desktop as a service, for example, WorkSpaces, and connect remotely using that stable environment supported by highly skilled IT personnel. So those workspaces definitely support big variety of different clients, and Andrew will tell a little more about that. And it provides consistent performance regardless of office location, etc., and so on. Arizona is a big state. However, density of population is pretty low, so we cannot afford to keep IT staff in each small town and support tons and tons of PCs scattered across the state. But as soon as users can connect using that client device to remote connection, remote solution like WorkSpaces, they are okay. And those workspaces are supported from centralized location. So, and finally, using this WorkSpaces as a framework, we developed fully automated technology of deployment and support of those workspaces. And I will tell about that a little later.
Thanks, Alex. So a little bit about WorkSpaces, kind of a broad overview for those that are new to the product. Just kind of cover some key features. So WorkSpaces, again, is a managed, secure desktop as a service solution. So with that, what you essentially can do is provision at scale Windows desktop computers. We have Windows 7, Windows 10 experience. You can provision those with various types of hardware profiles. You can load your applications, configure that, and you're off and running. So very useful for full desktop replacement, extremely useful for DR purposes. So even if you have a desktop solution in place, but you're thinking about continuity of operations, WorkSpaces is a solution that you can essentially bring up at scale to solve those types of problems. So it's a great solution for that. Like anything else with AWS, it's really kind of a pay-as-you-go option. You pay for what you use. So if you're talking about running a workspace on a monthly basis, on an hourly basis, we have a lot of different pricing models and options, which we'll get into to talk about how we can help, with providing desktop solutions from a cost-effective standpoint. So, end users tend to really like the WorkSpaces desktop experience. It is a little bit different than other virtual desktop solutions. What you get with this essentially is a persistent desktop. It's not a volatile environment, so you've got a dedicated CPU, dedicated memory, storage that is persistent for the life of that workspace for the user. And so what you're going to get out of that is consistent performance, and obviously across a number of different types of client devices. So we support Zero clients, Windows, Mac OS, iPad, Android, Chromebook, Fire Tablet, and also web browsers. So if you're running Chrome, Firefox, you don't have to load any software. You just go to a URL, log in, and you're up and running. So a lot of different options to support full-time employees as a full desktop replacement, mobile users, and even users that are just coming in to access from the web. From a security standpoint, as always, security is job zero for AWS. We provide a significant number of security features with WorkSpaces. So the first is obviously making sure that we're not putting any sensitive data on the client device. Everything stays within the workspace. We do support encryption and at rest and in transit for the workspace. We are excited to announce, I think it's highly relevant, as of June 9th, which was just last week, WorkSpaces is now a HIPAA-eligible solution under the AWS BAA. And so what that means is if you're looking to make sure that your users, your end users, have the ability to adhere to HIPAA guidelines and handle PHI, WorkSpaces now becomes a valid solution under the HIPAA BAA with AWS. That's fantastic news, and it really just speaks to the strengths that we provide from a security standpoint. We also support multi-factor authentication, so if you're utilizing Radius within your environment, whether that's on-premises or within your AWS environment, we can support that and tie into that to provide two-factor authentication for the users logging in. WorkSpaces obviously plays well with your virtual private cloud and your on-premises environment. So from that perspective, WorkSpaces will integrate with Active Directory, whether that's running on-premises, running in EC2, or running in one of our managed directory services in AWS. We have you covered across the board for that. And so you don't have to rebuild or reconstitute those user IDs. You can authenticate to those. And obviously, AD is a major factor when you think about provisioning and automation, because we want to utilize a number of different components of AD to make sure that happens smoothly, and you can scale to thousands of desktops with minimal administrative overhead. As it relates to your VPC, when you deploy a workspace, you're deploying it into a multi-availability zone architecture in your virtual private cloud. And you're running those on private subnets. So you can, if you have VPN connectivity into your VPC, or if you're using Direct Connect, you can establish private connectivity to your applications and services running in your VPC or on premises. So you're not having to worry about traversing public networks to access your mission-critical applications. And then from an administration standpoint, patching, all the configuration management you typically have to do on a PC endpoint. We do support integrations with System Center Manager as well as EC2 Systems Manager. So when you're thinking about patching and config management, we have solutions there. We'll also talk a little more about different ways you can avoid kind of that process and think about imaging and deployment and kind of pushing new images out to your workspaces as a means of addressing those and keeping those up to date. From a pricing perspective, economics is always important. So as I mentioned before, WorkSpaces is a pay-as-you-go type of solution. It's fully managed. There's no infrastructure you have to think about or manage. It scales on demand. It is available in a number of different AWS regions, and we do support hourly and monthly billing models. And we have some interesting solutions to help you as you think about what's the best pricing model per user. We have some solutions that are available for you to kind of load into your environment and give you the information you need and automate a lot of those decision-making processes around billing and which billing option makes the most sense for a user that's using it all the time versus a user that may be only logging in an hour a day. We can help you kind of manage that process with our cost optimizer. So in terms of where WorkSpaces is available today, WorkSpaces is available in the US in our Northern Virginia and Oregon regions. In EU, we have it available in the Frankfurt and Ireland locations, and then in Asia, we have it in Tokyo, Singapore, and Sydney. And here's where we start to kind of get into the details of WorkSpaces and provisioning. So I'll kind of summarize some of these different dimensions and components here, and then we'll spend the remainder of our time talking about each of these in detail. So when you think about automating, and a strategy to automate the life cycle of a workspace for a user, you really want to be thinking about all these different things. And there's obviously things to consider, some best practices which we'll go through. The first, of course, is an image. And when you think about an image with a workspace, an image is just that. It's a virtual machine image. It's going to have an operating system and may or may not have pre-installed software that you want to provide for your users. With the software, we have a number of different set of strategies for loading software. You can preload that into the image. You can apply that when the workspace launches using, let's say, group policy. You have ways of deploying that through Workspace's Application Manager, and another solution which we'll talk about in a little bit today, AppStream 2.0. Hardware is also important. You want to make sure that you're not over-provisioning and you're right-sizing the desktop performance for your users on an individual basis, potentially. So we have some different options and bundles around matching up the right hardware specifications for your users. We'll talk about that. Pricing models, again, hourly, always on, two different options, which we'll talk about. AD is extremely important in talking about provisioning and automation. So thinking about things like group policies and how do you automate that. Thinking about organizational units and how you define where your machines are and applying those types of policies. How you actually determine which workspace and which configuration a user is going to receive could be a function of deployment groups and security groups in your AD environment. And also thinking about different ways of making sure your users are restricted or have access to admin rights on their desktops as needed, and then what kind of things you have to do from a service account standpoint to give access to AD and make sure that everything's running smoothly. Scripting ultimately is where all the magic happens. That's going to be a function of things happening in the workspace, logging on, booting, turning off. Alex has a lot of insights on this, which he'll share with you around how he's done this in his environment. Obviously, we have API actions, so you can fully automate the creation of a workspace, rebuilding workspaces. We'll talk about some of those different lifecycle events around the workspace. A number of different services in AWS that will help you audit and track these events. CloudTrail, obviously very important. CloudWatch from a monitoring and metrics perspective. And then different ways of actually running those commands. Whether you prefer to run PowerShell, on an EC2 instance to run these different API commands, AWS Lambda is a great solution for automating these as well. If you prefer Python or Boto 3 and our SDKs, great solutions there. And ultimately, security is always important. You want to make sure you know what to configure in terms of roles and security to make sure that can all happen. And then how do you think about the clients, the endpoints themselves? Are they zero clients? Are they web? Are they mobile app? And the different things to consider there. And then ultimately, all the things you have to manage when you're in operation. So we'll cover all these in detail for the remainder of the session. So from an imaging perspective, the key thing to think about, especially if you're new to workspaces, when you provision a workspace for a user, what you're actually provisioning is a bundle. So a bundle consists of two things. It consists of an image and it consists of a hardware profile. So the image, a couple different ways you can do that. We do provide a number of predefined or pre-installed images which AWS maintains. So we offer a Windows 7 desktop experience, Windows 10, and some additional software as well that are add-ons such as Microsoft Office and Trend Micro if you're looking to purchase those products from us on an hourly basis. A lot of customers will do that as a preference to utilizing your own volume licensing within Microsoft, so you have some choices there. But you also have options for bringing your own images. So if you have a golden image, if you're already in a VDI type of environment and you want to bring Windows 7 or Windows 10 into AWS, we do also support that as an option. So we give you some flexibility there in terms of utilizing our images as a base or bringing your own images. And then when you think about custom pre-installed software, you'll typically start with either an image provided by us or an image that you're going to provide to AWS. And then you configure that, you go through the process of preloading that software, and you go through a process to essentially image that. Key point here is when you are creating those images and when you are pre-installing software, that does become your responsibility to manage. And so there's some pros and cons and things you want to think about there to make sure that imaging and managing those images doesn't become cumbersome in your environment. Software. So obviously different strategies there. We talked a little bit about those. Pre-installing is a pretty common approach. The key thing you want to think about there, again, is how many images do I have to maintain in my environment? As you'll see from the ADOT example, which Alex will go through, managing images doesn't have to be complex, and there's different ways you can pre-install all the software that all the users might need. You can do things like software restriction policies in Active Directory to restrict certain applications for certain users, but only have to maintain one master image. And that's sort of the approach that ADOT is taking. But you also may want to load those images and load those applications through group policy. So if you have applications that you want to load in based on a user or based on where they sit in the environment, that's also a great approach that can solve that and not require you to have to maintain lots of different images in your environment. And you also want to consider the size of the applications themselves. If you have to bootstrap a lot of that stuff when the machine is first being created, you want to think about the end user experience for that. So if you have a user that wants to provision a workspace and be up and running in just a few minutes, you don't want to load too much at runtime. You want to think about preloading some of that. So there's a kind of a balance you want to think about in those applications. And then ultimately you want to think about system requirements and usage patterns. There may be alternative ways of bringing those software applications to the desktop or to the user. So as an example, if you have a extremely resource-intensive application, and I'll just mention as an example like an ArcGIS Pro or a 3D application that really strains the desktop, and you need to make sure that you're bringing the right level of resources. Well, one approach is just to upgrade the end user's workspace to support that. Another approach might be to couple the hardware requirements, the compute and the memory, with the actual application. And so AppStream 2.0 is a great solution that allows you to do that. You essentially package the application and deliver that over an HTML5 browser, whether you're running in WorkSpaces or in any browser for that matter. And so you have some different options there. If you've got a use case where the user only needs the application for, let's say, a few hours a day, rather than upgrading the entire workspace to a larger system or larger hardware platform, you can really kind of offload that from the workspace and run it in an AppStream environment, which is auto-scaled and kind of more economical for those types of use cases. So we'll talk a little bit more about that today. There is a session immediately following this that will go into great detail on AppStream as well. From a hardware perspective, we do offer 4 different flavors, if you will, for workspaces. So value, standard, performance, and graphics. So graphics will be running NVIDIA GPU with 4 gigabytes of video memory. Key things to consider there: when you make a selection on hardware, you are making that selection per user. So you can think about different users in your organization where they might have specific hardware requirements, and obviously economics becomes a factor as well. A lot of customers will start with the standard and then kind of adjust to that. But the idea is you want to be able to automate that and ultimately let the user and let the business decide what's appropriate, and kind of think about provisioning all those different use cases so you have it all covered. And then again, think about offloading CPU and memory if you can, to a solution like AppStream 2.0 so that you can kind of minimize the workspace bundle and really just put the horsepower where it needs to be to support the application. Pricing models, again, we have always on or hourly. So always on is a great pricing solution for workspaces that are really full desktop replacements. So you're utilizing it at least 40 hours a week. There's kind of a sweet spot there where hourly becomes less expensive, and then if you're using it enough, monthly makes more sense. So we have both options, and we have a cost optimizing tool, which I'll talk about, that help you figure out what is the right pricing model, and you can adjust that on a per user basis. So you're not required or locked into any of this. You can adjust that at any time. And so with that, with some of these different concepts, I'll ask Alex to kind of walk through his environment and how he's automated a lot of these different concepts.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. And before I start explaining how all this works, I want to say special thanks to AWS and especially to Andrew for his dedication on customers' need and for helping us directly to build those cloud-based services and implement them first into piloting and then to production, including workspaces. As we told in the beginning, comparing with other portions of AWS, workspaces are pretty new, and we are still learning how to use them and how to implement them best. And looking in this diagram, out of box, AWS provided a great framework for creating workspaces for users. So this is their part. It's including images, which Andrew told about, and there are several images available right out of box. It's Server 2008 R2, which provides Windows 7-like experience for users. Server 2016, which provides Windows 10-like experience for users, and several bundles with included Microsoft Office and other applications. So currently, Office 2010 is available, Office 2013, and Office 2016 is available with those bundles. Plus some basic images for GPU-based workspaces. And combining with images, there are some bundles. Bundle include image, so the image of operating system, plus hardware configuration. And Andrew already mentioned it, like 4 different hardware specs available for deployment to workspace. Plus to that, there is also a very important part. It's CLI, command line interface, and SDK for using workspaces with scripting, for managing them with scripting. And considering all this framework, which was given to us by Amazon natively, so then there's 2 models of deployment of workspaces to users. One of models is fully manual. It's available right out of box, pretty straightforward. Everybody who subscribed to AWS and have access to Workspace region in that console, they can deploy Workspaces by selecting what image they want to use, what hardware bundles they want to use, and provide username and directory, and it's deployed. So within about 20-30 minutes, users will have fully functional virtual machine running in the cloud with full admin rights. On that, user can log in and use as a personal computer in the cloud from wherever in the world they have internet access. Very plain and simple. However, with that, it comes to the question of maintenance, because in this case, it's deployed like PC, it's treated like PC. So user is fully responsible for maintaining, or customer's IT is fully responsible of maintaining that instance. If something goes wrong, they need to fix it, they need to provide updates, patch manager, antivirus solution, etc., and so on. This deployment model is good for very limited number of users, so most of them are computer-savvy people, like developers, like maybe some IT staff who need some testing of application, etc., and so on. But for majority of regular users in our department, IT used as a tool to do their daily jobs, not like something they are focused on. It's like, it should be plain and simple, like hammer or pliers or something like that. They can quickly and very intuitive to start using. And for that purpose, it was developed fully automated deployment mechanism. So first, it starts with building images. So using one of the base images provided by AWS, we built a custom image. It's deployed to master workspace, created under one user account. And in that workspace, we installed all applications required for all end users. In our agency, about 50 or 60 applications. They cover 90 or 95% of all users. There are several thousand users, but they use pretty limited number of all applications. And all those applications were installed on master workspace. Definitely, first question coming from you, and I expected, so what's about security of those applications? And we handle this several ways, because like if this image deployed to all users, they will definitely have applications unrelated to them. But majority of those applications, they have its own built-in security. Like for example, we use mainframe terminal emulator. Mainframe has its own login procedure, own security, so we don't care if some unauthorized user launches it, there's nothing to do, access denied, unless they have perfectly valid authorized credentials. Same with other applications like connection to databases, connection to some backend apps via web interface, etc., and so on. Those apps, they have their own security tools providing safe and secure access to the application. So in this case, applications is pre-installed, but unauthorized users cannot use them. Only authorized will use. And I will tell about that a little later when I explain concept of regions in this case. So based on this master workspace, so we create a custom image, which Andrew told us it's Amazon allows creating custom images. For those of you who are familiar with some competitors' technologies, it's like Citrix provisioning or like VMware provisioning when you copy to a new VMDK file. Pretty similar processes used in workspaces, creating AMI and storing an S3 bucket for workspaces. And then later that image can be used for deployment. And as a complex of those images and hardware specifications, there are some bundles available, and those bundles are pre-configured on AWS console, ready for deployment. And then it comes to the moment when it needs to be deployed to users. So user it submitted a computer access request form for the user, and then data security places that user in specific Active Directory security group. Those groups created specifically for bundles existing here. Like, for example, we have bundle Windows 7 Experience Value, Windows 7 Experience Standard, Windows 7 Experience Performance. Those according to hardware specification. We have also bundles Windows 10 Value, Standard, and Performance, Graphics Performance. So it's about 10 or something Active Directory security groups. And based on user's need, data security places user in that specific Active Directory group. And then we have a scheduled task, which is running every 60 minutes. And that scheduled task checking those Active Directory security groups. And let's find, for example, a new user showed up in one of those security groups. What then this scheduled task does? Script running under this scheduled task. It gives a command to AWS CLI, which is stored in Amazon Cloud, and then it creates a workspace automatically based on that Active Directory security group. So user needs Windows 7, for example, with Office 2010 value bundle. So just placed into Active Directory security group, and within 1 or 2 hours, workspace is created out of pre-created image. All applications already installed, everything is ready for user. And then, can you switch?
Yep.
And then if we need to, for example, to redeploy this image, it's very simple. Just we can go and delete that workspace, and deployment script will redeploy it again. And this is how we are doing monthly page management. So we update in master image. We create update bundles after testing. So one night we give a command, rebuild all workspaces. Definitely those questions, how do we preserve data? How do we preserve user's profile? And that will be a topic of next conversation after Andrew tells his part.
Thanks, Alex. So talking a little more about Active Directory and some things to consider, as part of this, this process. Organizational units is obviously a key. If you need to define group policy and apply that, you'll apply that typically to an OU. And that OU will have the virtual machines, the EC2 instances, and the workspaces running there. What's important there is that for users, what you typically will do is employ a feature like a loopback feature inside of group policy, so that you don't have to move your users around. You can basically just apply those to the OUs where the machines are residing. Alex has built a really nice process, but there's other ways to do this as well around how do you give admin access to those workspaces users when needed. There is an option sort of for the entire organization or the entire directory to allow workspaces to have admin rights. A lot of cases, especially in situations where you have remote motor vehicle offices, having admin rights is not a great idea. So it's good to restrict that. Workspaces allows you to do that. There are instances where a user temporarily may have to have admin rights. And so Alex has built a process to do that. But in general, you can use concepts like group policy preferences and other techniques so that you can automate the process of giving admin rights either permanently or on a temporary basis. And the key thing here with imaging as well, think about kind of blocking inheritance. It's really important when you're creating images to sort of have a clean environment. So when you're applying a lot of policies and you're trying to image that, what you may end up with is a product that doesn't fit well when you go apply that into your production environment. So it's great to think about blocking inheritance and just kind of having a clean kind of environment to create those images. Different concepts and ideas for AD. As Alex mentioned, it's really pretty simplistic and straightforward to create security groups for each of the different bundles that you're going to deploy. And then ultimately, however that request is coming in, whether it's through a desktop request form, which is the case for ADOT, or whether it's a different automated method, ultimately the user landing in a security group should be the process to provision or even to deprovision the user's workspace. We also have, as part of the Active Directory and group policy, every workspace ships with a admin template for GPO. So if you want to do things like adjust like session timeout, clipboard redirection, if you want to avoid, for security reasons, having the clipboard have access back to the the client platform, printer devices, and things like that, there is a template that you can apply into your GPO. And so that's something to think about as well when you're building those group policy templates. Start from a process that is well defined and documented from the workspace. And then ultimately, in terms of service accounts, you want to make sure that you provide sufficient access for workspaces to authenticate your users, traverse the directory, and so we utilize services for that, and we have documentation that describes exactly what's required from a least privilege perspective so that your users can be authenticated. But it's also important to think about having those service accounts for the imaging process. You don't want to use your own personal ID. Again, that might require you to have policies and things loaded for your account. You want to be in a clean environment when you're creating your images. In terms of scripting, Alex will talk a little bit further about the user environment itself, log in, log out, boot. What do you have to do, things to think about so that you can either build from scratch, rebuild, terminate, recreate. You can really kind of work on the life cycle of the workspace without having to worry about the user's data. And there's different approaches to that, which Alex will cover with his insights. The different API actions you can run in workspaces. Obviously, CLI, SDK are different approaches. AWS supports a broad range of SDK platforms, so PowerShell, .NET, Python, you name it. We have a lot of different coverage for that. What's important there is you want to pick your platform. In ADOT's case, you've got an EC2 machine running scripts, as Alex mentioned, every 60 minutes. That's a great approach. AWS Lambda is a great approach as well. You can use Lambda to automate all these different tasks, create your workspaces. One potential approach is just to run that as a scheduled event using CloudWatch. Other ways of doing that is to actually integrate CloudWatch logs with your domain controllers. So as an example, if you want it more of an event-based process where when you add a user to a group, AD is going to audit that event. You can kick that over to CloudWatch logs and then kick off a Lambda function automatically whenever that occurs. So if you prefer more of an event-based, kind of an immediate response, one way to do it, a scheduled process, let's say every 60 minutes or maybe even more frequently, is also an option. But you have different options there, some flexibility. With scripting as well, you want to think about your tagging strategy. Tagging is obviously very important if you've got a number of different cost centers to support in your organization. So tagging can be utilized with workspaces to support billing processes and showback, but it can also be utilized if you want to control which cost models you want to use for your workspaces, whether it's hourly or always on monthly. Tagging can help influence that as well. And then ultimately, you want to think about the IAM roles, the security policies and roles that you'll have in place so that all these different things can act. We always want to recommend a least privilege process. So have a role in your environment that can run those different API actions. And if you have to have a service account or something interact with Active Directory, we have a great solution to secure those credentials. EC2 Systems Manager Parameter Store, as well as our key management service, allows you to encrypt those credentials and store them in a secure location. And so it's a great way of kind of taking those credentials and keeping them out of your scripts, have them in a secure location, and you can put policies and some audit controls around that as well to ensure that you're adhering to your compliance and risk standards. So Alex will take you a little bit through the ideas and concepts of user management, what's happening in the workspace when you're logging in, logging out, or booting up for the first time.
Okay, so when we talk about workspaces or any other computer environment, so what is most important for users? It's convenience to use, it's stability, it's 100% availability, easy to support, to maintain, and everything and so on. So it should be simple as a hammer. I said about that already. So in order to do that, we developed a fully automatic approach of serving workspaces to our users, and we use several tools for that. First is a GPO solution. So using the main GPO for workspaces, we control how appearance of workspaces will look for the user. So we customize start menu, we customize start desktop, we use folder redirection process. So in this case, no data stored locally on the workspaces except of temp files. We redirect everything to the network drive, which has regular backups, and in this case, plus using roaming profiles on the workspaces. Yeah, those old-fashioned roaming profiles from Microsoft, which many people hate them. However, if to use them pretty wisely, they're still usable and very good for this environment. So using folder redirection plus roaming profiles plus some script in which does very extensive cleanup of those profiles before logging off, making profiles really tiny in this case. So they provide really good stability and availability of data. Users log in, roaming profile is loaded into Workspace. Users work, they store all their data on network drive, and when they log off, before actually session closes, log off script cleans that profile, reduces its size just to a few megabytes, containing mostly like registry settings and application settings, no data at all, and then logs off and closes session. And this approach allows us to use, to make those workspaces, I mean workspace instances, like fully disposable. They are not valuable for users like personal computer, for example, or other type of VDIs. So in this case, users don't care if it's broken, and it's very easy for IT support to maintain them. So what happens if, for example, workspace gets corrupt, something goes wrong? Definitely with PC, it might have, in this solution, it might be rebuilding profile for the user, for example, if something goes wrong. With this solution, it's even simpler. It's rebuilding the entire workspace. We go and using these automatic tools by giving a command via CLI or from the console, which Amazon helping us to develop, or using manually existing web console on AWS, we give command rebuild workspace. That's it. In about 30 minutes, brand new workspace deployed to that particular user, and everything is back. Data is already stored on the network, profile is already stored on the network, and machine instance, however badly it was corrupt before, it restored to brand new status of gold image we created during initial provisioning. And same technology we are using for monthly maintenance, like we install updates, we update all applications, install additional applications, remove applications, do whatever we need. So then we deploy it to new master image, and overnight, that's the power of AWS cloud. We can rebuild thousands of workspaces just with one command via CLI, and next morning users will come and log into already updated workspaces, having all their data, all their settings back, everything is like brand new out of box. Very nice solution. And continuing about how applications delivered to user, I told that we bake those applications pre-installed on the master image, and users have relevant and irrelevant applications on their workspace instances. And we implemented concept of regions for this purpose. So what region is? First, we are running GPU and boot up script. It provides users some desktop icons, some start menu items, some mandatory favorites, links, etc., and so on for entire agency. But then we have Active Directory security group and login script. And those parts, when the user log in, check in Active Directory security group, and if user belongs to a specific region determined by those security groups. So then they load links to additional applications already installed on the workspaces, but having them ready to users. So for example, like those people who provide driver licenses for customers, MVD CSRs, motor vehicles, they have only MVD applications. Equipment management service, they have their specific applications, etc., and so on. Very easy to manage via Active Directory groups. And talking about security, those applications are hidden from users using drive C and D. However, if they even find a way how to go to the drive and launch an authorized application, we really don't care too much, because applications has its own security. So unauthorized access is blocked on that level. And for maybe few applications which are not so secure and cannot use built-in security, we use a different approach, like GPU-based installation of application only for specific groups of users, workspace application management, and would like to try a new technology, AppStream, which is Andrew, and next session we'll talk about. So right now it's a complex solution, but this makes workspaces pretty great tool for our users.
Thanks, Alex. So talking about client endpoints, a couple of things to consider there. So if you're looking at zero clients as a solution, kind of as a full desktop replacement, that is a solution that ADOT is implementing for a good number of their MVD locations. Zero clients bring some nice opportunities. Number one, low cost, so long kind of life cycle. Low cost compared obviously to a typical thin client or certainly a full desktop PC. If you are thinking about implementing a zero client, there's a number of different manufacturers that support those. Most of the typical desktop vendors are going to support that. There are some tools and some components you want to think about. The first is the Teradici PC over IP connection manager. So this is a necessary component for the zero client to authenticate a zero client to the workspace. Most of the time, if you're just launching, let's say, a WorkSpaces app on an Apple device or on Windows, it will authenticate directly to the gateway and you'll be able to start your session right away. But with zero clients, there is an additional piece that's required. This typically runs within your virtual private cloud. It is a free piece of software, so you're only paying for the compute time on an EC2 instance. You can run these in a load-balanced multi-AZ HA configuration with load balancing, so it's a great solution to support maximum uptime. And the nice thing about Teradici, they also support a solution called PC over IP Management Console. And so if you're looking for a solution like ADOT where you want a fully managed provision plug-and-play solution, you can ship a zero client to a remote office somewhere in the middle of nowhere, you plug it into the network, and you're up and running. You get all the configuration automatically, all the profiles, the certificates, everything you need to connect that zero client to your workspace is already handled. This is a great solution. Management Console does come in a number of different pricing options. You can buy enterprise support. They do have a free tier as well, up to, I believe, 2,000 workspaces. So that's a pretty good solution, even if you're just looking to get started. If you're thinking about a plug-and-play experience where you don't want to have an IT technician, prep the environment, just have it ready to go. Great solution for that. For the rest of our clients, we have a URL, clients.amazonworkspaces.com. You can go to there and pull down any client platform that you want. If you need to automate that piece of that into, let's say, Windows, you can download and run the WorkSpaces Windows client as an MSI, so you can automate that process as well. And then, of course, if you want to automate and enable web access, easy to do. You just turn it on, and then your users can access over the web with multi-factor if need be. From a management perspective, we talked about rebuilds as a major part of the process to keep your images and keep your workspaces healthy and up to date. And so in the ADOT experience, in the ADOT use case, you've got a process where the image itself is capturing all this application updates, any changes to the environment, operating system patches, whatever has to be baked into that image is happening there, and then it's getting pushed out on a regular basis to the entire population of users. That's one approach, and it's actually a really good approach if you want to maintain a very strict, kind of an immutable concept in your workspaces environment. In some cases, that may not be a great approach. If you have users that are a large population of users that are technically savvy, they want to load their own software, they have admin rights, rebuilding the workspace on a continual basis may not be a great approach for that. What you really want to do is patch those workspaces in place and manage those more or less like a traditional desktop. And so that's where SCCM, EC2 Systems Manager, and other tools come into play. So you can manage those applications and those workspaces persistently, or you can go through a rebuild process. And so pros and cons to each approach, but you have the flexibility to do that. In ADOT's case, you've got two distinct types of users. You've got your IT and developer, savvy users. They're going to have one approach, and then for the remainder of the users, they're going to have an approach which utilizes the rebuild process to push clean, updated images that are fully patched and ready to go. So key concepts there. Alex talked a lot about redirection and user profiles. While you can obviously put data on the workspace and it will be persistent, if you have to do a rebuild, that data, especially if it's sitting on the C drive, could be replaced with whatever's on the image, your latest and greatest image. And so, folder redirection is a great way to offload that data so the user always has their data. Even if the workspace has to be completely blown away and recreated, the user experience essentially is staying consistent. Workspace start and stop actions are also very important when it comes to hourly model, and making sure that your workspaces are kind of ready and kind of warmed up when you want to start your day. And ultimately, you want to make sure you utilize concepts like SNS to send notifications to users when you're ready to make a change to their environment. So we have SES, SNS, and different services to help notify IT staff as well as the end user. And so desktop application streaming, the next session, I think you'll definitely want to stick around if you want to learn more about AppStream and how you can kind of fully end-to-end utilize AppStream for essentially presenting any desktop application over an HTML5 browser. Key features there especially are going to be the fact that you can utilize that over a scalable fleet of servers, and you're really offloading the compute from the desktop for the application. And so learn a little bit more about that in the next session. And then finally, the WorkSpaces cost optimizer is a piece that I mentioned early on. If you want a great solution that you can just drop into your account, it's practically free of charge. It costs a little bit to run Lambda functions and a little bit of storage, but a few dollars a month. It's a great solution if you want to be able to automate your cost management of the workspace. What it will do basically is run every 24 hours, look and see how your users are utilizing their workspaces, and automatically adjust for that in your billing process. So it will take users and convert them to hourly or convert them to monthly. So with that, I really want to thank Alex for being here today and making the trip from sunny Phoenix to be with us today, and I really appreciate his insights, and I hope you guys got a lot out of the session. Thanks very much.
If you have any questions, you are welcome to stay longer and ask them, and we will be happy to answer, but this is not a mandatory part of this meeting, so if you have something next on the schedule, you're free to go.
Yep. Any questions? I'm sorry? C2S. C2S, not available in C2S. So in the U.S. we have U.S. East 2 or U.S. East 1 and U.S. West 2, Oregon region.
I'd like to put another vote for that. Two quick questions. Once they launch the workstation, can you change the hardware profile?
So the hardware profile becomes essentially a recreation of that workspace environment. So if you follow a lot of the techniques that Alex talked about today around redirecting the user's data and kind of managing that environment, it becomes more or less a non-event other than the time that it takes to do that process. If the desktop environment is more persistent where that data is being stored on the workspace itself, you'll need a little more of a kind of a rebuild process to load those applications, load that data in again. So changing the hardware profile really becomes a function of what is the overall process to manage the workspaces and how impactful will it be to the user.
With automatic provision, it's a very simple process. It's coming basically to removing user from one Active Directory security group for deployment and adding to another group. And within 2 hours, deployment script will kill the old workspace and deploy a new with new hardware spec.
Thank you. And the second part of that is you have VMDK files or virtual desktops floating around. Is that something that can be stored up there?
So you're talking about bringing your own images to, yes, absolutely. So if you have, let's say, VMDK, VMware-based machine images, we do have an import process that you can utilize to bring those machine images in. We convert them to essentially an AMI or an Amazon machine image, and those are available then to be integrated into a bundle. You'll pick a hardware profile. Obviously, you can use the same image across multiple profiles. At this time with WorkSpaces, if you are looking to bring your own, there is a couple of things to think about. One is you have to license the operating system as part of that process, and there is a minimum volume of workspaces. I believe I want to say 200. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it's in that range. So there's a couple different areas to think about, but if you've already got already put a lot of effort and emphasis into building that image, you are able to utilize that and bring that up. Sure.
No questions?